Bantry Bay, County Cork, October 1588. 37 ships of the Spanish Armada are wrecked along this coastline in a single storm week. The survivors wade ashore, dark-haired, olive-skinned, exhausted. And some, the story goes, never leave. Their children become the Black Irish. Their grandchildren become a mystery that travel writers, genealogy websites, and school curricula spend 4 centuries confidently explaining. It is a beautiful story, and this episode will eliminate it in the next 60 seconds. Professor Dan Bradley at Trinity College Dublin led the most comprehensive genetic survey of Irish population structure ever conducted, the Irish DNA Atlas, published in 2018. His team identified at least 10 distinct genetic clusters across the island of Ireland. The Spanish genetic signal attributable to 16th century maritime contact, statistically undetectable in any of them. Not faint, not marginal, undetectable. The Armada story doesn't need a rebuttal, it needs a removal. But here's where it gets strange. The dark features the Armada was invented to explain, they're real. They appear in family photographs, in census records, in living faces across Connacht and Munster today. The explanation is wrong. The features are not, which means the actual source has never been publicly named. And this is the part that changes everything. Everyone has been asking the wrong question. Where did the dark features come from? That is the question 4 centuries of folk history have been trying to answer. But the genome record demands the opposite. Where did the pale features come from? Because every ancient Irish genome recovered before approximately 2.0 BCE confirms the same thing: dark to brown skin, dark hair. The pale, freckled, red-haired image that the world associates with Ireland does not appear in the ancient record. It arrives. It arrives with force. And it arrives from the east. A Mesolithic man recovered from a limestone cave in Limerick, catalogued as Annog I, dated to approximately 200 BCE, carried a deep mitochondrial signature of the Western European hunter-gatherers who had lived on this Atlantic coast for thousands of years before him. Genetic reconstruction of his likely appearance: dark skin, dark hair. He was Irish by every available measure. He looked nothing like what the world calls Irish today. If you've ever actually wondered where you come from, not the family story, the real biological answer, then subscribe. Because what comes next goes deeper than most people are willing to go. What the genome record confirms is this: the image we call ancient Irish was assembled from the biological remains of 2 successive invasions. It is not a portrait of a people. It is a record of their replacement. They were something older, and they are gone. Gough's Cave, Cheddar Gorge, Somerset, England, 71/5 BCE. A man approximately 20 years old dies here. The circumstances, unknown. The cause, unrecorded. His skeleton lies undisturbed for over 9,000 years. Then in 2018, Selina Brace at the Natural History Museum in London drills into his petrous bone, the densest structure in the human skull, the part most likely to preserve DNA across millennia, and sequences his entire genome. What she finds changes every museum display, every school textbook, every period drama set in ancient Britain or Ireland. He has dark to black skin, dark curly hair, blue-green eyes. He is not an anomaly. He is the template. This discovery had been sitting in the genomic record for decades. Almost nobody talked about it until now. The man in the Somerset cave and the man in the Limerick cave are, genetically, the same population, the Western European hunter-gatherers, the WHG lineage who occupied the Atlantic coast from Spain to Ireland for thousands of years after the glaciers retreated. They shared haplogroups. They shared phenotypes, separated by the Irish Sea, united by bone. Dr. Brace's results were specific. No derived alleles for the reduced pigmentation genes, SLC24A5 or SLC45A2, the 2 variants most responsible for pale skin in modern Europeans. Those alleles were not present, not rare, not emerging, absent. The WHG population that occupied Ireland had no genetic pathway to the pale complexion we associate with the Irish today. Dr. Brace's conclusion: light skin in Western Europe evolved later than anyone had assumed, and spread through subsequent migration, not through the people who were actually here first. Every museum reconstruction, every tourist board image, every historical drama that depicts ancient Irish people as pale and light-haired is depicting the wrong population. The people who lived on this island for the first 5,000 years of human habitation were dark-skinned. The image we call ancient Irish was manufactured during the 19th century Romantic nationalist movement. It has no support in the prehistoric genomic record. Here is what makes this stranger still. In 1997, geneticist Brian Sykes at Oxford ran a mitochondrial DNA comparison between the 9-0-year-old Cheddar man and the people currently living in Cheddar Village. A local schoolteacher named Adrian Target matched. The WHG lineage, dark-skinned, blue-eyed Atlantic coast, did not disappear entirely. It persisted. In a school classroom, teaching history. to children who had no idea what they were sitting across from. 5,000 years of actual Irish human history has been excluded from the cultural narrative, not by conspiracy, but by the simple fact that the people who wrote Irish history did not have ancient DNA and assumed the monument. Builders looked like the people who inherited the monuments. They didn't. We do not know what happened to them. Ballynahattie, County Down, Northern Ireland. Approximately 3300 BCE, a woman dies and is buried beneath a Neolithic passage tomb near what is now the Shaw's Bridge area south of Belfast. She will not be found for 5,000 years. When Dr. Lara Cassidy at Trinity College Dublin sequences her genome, the picture is not what anyone expected. Black hair, brown eyes. Her genetic signature most closely resembles Neolithic farmers from Anatolia, what is now Turkey, who moved across Europe over thousands of years and reached the Atlantic coast of Ireland around 4000 BCE. She is the first ancient Irish person whose face we can partially reconstruct with scientific confidence. She looks Southern European. She helped build the most precise solar calendar in Bronze Age Europe. And yet, the data said the exact opposite of what the standard narrative had assumed. The Neolithic farmers who reached Ireland built Newgrange, a 97,000-ton passage tomb aligned to the winter solstice sunrise with an accuracy that modern engineers, measuring with satellite equipment, confirmed they could not meaningfully improve. These were not primitive people with lucky geometry. They were astronomers working without metal tools on an island at the edge of the known world. Dr. Cassidy's 2020 survey in Nature, covering 44 ancient Irish genomes, confirmed the picture. The Neolithic farming population that built Ireland's passage tombs arrived as a mass. Migration from Anatolia via the Atlantic coast of Europe, likely by sea from Brittany. They replaced the hunter-gatherers so completely that by the Middle Neolithic, the Mesolithic signal, those dark-skinned people who had been here for thousands of years had been reduced to minimal traces. One civilization replaced another. The mechanism remains unknown. At Pulnabrone Portal Tomb in County Clare, the oldest known burial structure on the island dated to approximately 4200 BCE. Cassidy's team sequenced a 6-month-old male infant. He had 3 copies of chromosome 21, Down syndrome, the oldest confirmed case in world history. His isotope analysis showed breastfeeding. He was buried with bone collars, bone earrings, and dog's tooth beads, the richest grave goods in the entire Pulnabrone cemetery. A society that had not yet discovered metal looked at a child born visibly different and gave him the most honorable burial available. 5,500 years ago. The Neolithic farming culture that built Newgrange, that honored this child with a royal burial, that calculated the winter solstice alignment to within minutes. This is the civilization that 19th century Romantic nationalism erased from the origins of Ireland narrative in favor of the Celts. The Celts came later. The Celts came from the same migration wave that replaced this civilization. The people who invented the cultural idea of ancient Ireland were the genetic descendants of the people who destroyed it. The closest living genetic relatives of the people who built Newgrange are not Irish. They are Sardinian. The island of Sardinia, isolated from the Bronze Age replacement wave that swept the rest of Europe, preserved the Neolithic Anatolian farmer, genome most intact. And the people who call themselves Irish today carry only partial traces of the civilization that left the most famous monument on the island. Newgrange Passage Tomb, County Meath, approximately 3200 BCE. Inside the cruciform chamber at the heart of the monument, excavators in the 1970s find a set of unburnt human bones, unusual in a culture that typically cremated its dead, in a decorated niche beside the entrance. The bones are labeled NG10. They belong to a man. When Dr. Lara Cassidy extracts his DNA and sequences his genome, she says she has never seen anything like it. His 2 copies of the genome, one from his mother, one from his father, are almost identical. The genomic signature of first-degree incest. His parents were full siblings, or a parent and their own child. Stay with this, because this next part is the reason this video exists. In every documented human culture across history, first-degree incest carries a universal taboo, everywhere, in every era, with one exception. The exception is always the same. The ruling elite of a theocratic dynasty, in which the taboo is broken precisely because only another family member is considered a worthy partner. Egyptian pharaohs, Inca god kings, and, it now appears, the Neolithic ruler buried at the center of Ireland's most celebrated prehistoric monument. Cassidy's 2020 Nature study identified distant familial relationships between NG10 at Newgrange and individuals buried at passage tomb clusters up to 300 kilometers away, Carrowmore and Carrowkeel in County Sligo, Millen Bay in County Down. These sites span at least 500 years. The genomic data establishes a powerful extended kin group, a single ruling family, with preferential access to the most prestigious burial sites across the island for half a millennium. This is not a chieftaincy. This is a dynasty. And here is the detail that stops you cold. An 11th century CE text, 4,000 years after Newgrange was built, records a story of a builder, king of the Bru Naboini site, who restarted the daily solar cycle by sleeping with his sister. The neighboring passage tomb Douth carries a Middle Irish place name translatable as Hill of Sin. The oral tradition had been preserving the genomic reality for 4,000 years without knowing what it was preserving. The Newgrange man was not a curiosity. He was the product of a deliberate, institutionalized social practice. The same practice documented in Ptolemaic Egypt and the Inca Empire, in which the ruling class maintained its separation from the general population by violating the most fundamental biological taboo 5,200 years ago on the Atlantic fringe of Europe, in a society that had not yet encountered metal. The Newgrange dynasty ruled for at least 500 years. Their kin group spanned the island. And then, within a few centuries of NG10's burial, their genomic signature begins to disappear from the Irish archaeological record. Not gradually, not through intermarriage, through replacement. The people who came next were not their descendants. They were something else entirely. Pontic Steppe, north of the Black Sea, approximately 3,000 BCE. A population of semi-nomadic herders, genetic descendants of a mixed Caucasus and Eastern hunter-gatherer lineage, the people archaeologists call the Yamnaya, begin to move west. They carry bronze tools, domesticated horses, and a Y chromosome haplogroup called R1b. By 2500 BCE, their genetic signature appears in burial sites across Central Europe. By 2000 BCE, it has reached the most westerly island in the known world, Rathlin Island, off the northeast coast of Ireland. The genomic wave that began above the Black Sea has crossed 5,000 kilometers of continent and ocean. There are 3 things the Rathlin Island study revealed. The third one changes everything. 3 Bronze Age males recovered from a cyst burial on Rathlin Island, dated 2026 to 1534 BCE, carry the Y chromosome haplogroup R1b M269. First, they carry the earliest identified case of the hemochromatosis C282Y mutation. Second, they carry the blue eye allele, the lactase persistence variant, the genetic markers that define the modern Irish genome. Every one of them appearing in the Irish record for the first time in these 3 men on this island at this date. Before them, no R1b in the Irish record. After them, R1b approaches 94 to 99% in the west of Ireland. The replacement was not gradual, it was structural. Dr. Inigo Olalde and Professor David Reich at Harvard Medical School co-authored the largest ancient DNA analysis of the Bell Beaker culture ever conducted, 226 individuals across Europe, published in Nature in 2018. Their finding, the spread of the Bell Beaker complex to Britain and Ireland was associated with the replacement of approximately 90% of the existing Neolithic gene pool within a few hundred years. Reich described the finding himself as highly unexpected. That statement was made in 2018. About an event in 2000 BCE, the Ballinahady woman, black hair, brown eyes, Anatolian ancestry, and the 3 Rathlin Island males are separated by approximately 1,300 years. In that interval, the population she belonged to was replaced so completely that her Y chromosome lineage went from near universal to trace level in the Irish male population. Every man in her ruling dynasty, haplogroup I. Every Bronze Age male recovered after the replacement, haplogroup R1b. The switch is genomic. It is total. It has no confirmed cause. The phrase Celtic Irish, as used in tourism, genealogy, and popular history, describes the population that replaced the builders of Newgrange, not the builders themselves. The culture that inherited the monuments was not the culture that built them. And this is what the data still cannot explain. The modern Irish and the modern Basques share the highest concentrations of R1b in Europe, approaching 85 to 99% in specific Atlantic regions, genomically linked by the same Bronze Age steppe wave. The Basques speak a language that is not Indo-European. The Irish speak one that is. If both populations carry the same Y chromosome from the same source, why did one keep the old language while the other adopted the newcomers? That question remains unanswered, and when the answer comes, it will require rethinking how language and genetics have ever been assumed to travel together. Actually, hold on, before we go further. In the last video, we tracked how this same Bronze Age steppe wave reshaped the genetics of Central Europe in less than 3 centuries. Here you're watching it arrive at the western edge of the world and leave nothing of the civilization it found. I want to know what you think. If the people who built Newgrange disappeared without leaving a genomic majority in any living Irish person, what does that tell us about how civilizations actually end? Drop your answer in the comments. Because what I'm about to show you suggests the mechanism may already be in your own cells. A hematology clinic, Dublin, Ireland, today. 1 in every 83 Irish people is homozygous for a mutation called C282Y on the HFE gene, meaning they carry 2 copies of the variant that causes hereditary hemochromatosis, a condition in which the body accumulates iron in the organs until the liver, heart, and joints begin to fail. Ireland has the highest frequency of this mutation in the world. It is sometimes called the Celtic disease. It arrived in Ireland approximately 4,000 years ago. We know this because we found it in 3 Bronze Age males buried on Rathlin Island, the first time a known Mendelian disease variant had ever been identified in a prehistoric human burial. This isn't ancient history. This is in a blood sample right now. The C282Y mutation's geographic distribution across Europe maps almost precisely onto the Bell-Beaker expansion route. Highest in Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and Brittany, declining steadily eastward towards Central Europe. A meta-analysis by G. Lucat, covering 63 European populations, confirmed the distribution aligns with Atlantic Celtic-associated populations, the same populations that received the Bronze Age steppe wave earliest and most completely. The mutation is a biological record of a migration event, readable from a routine blood test in a GP's surgery. Dr. Cassidy's 2016 PNAS study was explicit. All 3 Rathlin Island Bronze Age males carried the C282Y variant, identified from 4,000-year-old petrous bone DNA. This is not metaphor. A clinical mutation diagnosable today, present in those specific 3 men, on that specific island, at that specific date. A living Irish person with hemochromatosis carries, in their HFE gene, a molecular inheritance from the population that replaced the Newgrange builders. The replacement is still biologically active. The picture now appears complete. The Bronze Age steppe migration replaced the Neolithic farmers, brought R1b, brought hemochromatosis, brought lactase persistence, brought blue eyes. This composite portrait is what we call the Irish genome. Question answered. Except it isn't, Dr. Cassidy's doctoral thesis, a genomic compendium of 44 ancient Irish individuals spanning the Mesolithic through to the Iron Age, contained a finding that the 2016 paper had not had the resolution to see. The skin-lightening alleles, SLC24A5 and SLC45A2, the same variants absent in Cheddar Man's genome, were not fixed in the Irish population at the time of the Bronze Age replacement. They were still increasing in frequency, through the Bronze Age, through the Iron Age, still spreading, still incomplete. The pale look arrived last, not first, which means the population carrying the older pigmentation patterns, darker skin, darker hair, was not a remnant of the Spanish Armada and not a foreign addition to a pale baseline. It was a measurably older genomic configuration, one in which the replacement process had not finished by the time recorded history began writing itself down. The Black Irish phenotype may be the biological record of incomplete replacement. And if that is true, then the features we are looking at when we see a dark-haired, dark-eyed Irish face are not the features of a foreign intrusion. They are the features of a civilization that was never fully erased. Newgrange, County Meath, December 21st, the winter solstice sunrise. At 8:58 in the morning, a single beam of light enters the roof box above the entrance and travels 19 meters down the stone passage to illuminate the inner chamber. The alignment is accurate to within minutes of the modern astronomical calculation. The monument is 5,200 years old. The end users who built it have been dead for 5,000 years. It still works. Everything I just told you, hold on to it. Because this is about to mean something completely different. The Neolithic farming population associated with the Newgrange builders, confirmed by Cassidy et al., as genomically closer to Sardinian Neolithic farmers than to any modern Irish population, accounts for a minority fraction of modern Irish ancestry. The population category that was majority in Ireland from approximately 4000 BCE to 2000 BCE is now a minority signal in the modern Irish genome. 2,000 years of human civilization on this island. The passage tombs, the dynastic elite, the Down syndrome child buried with honor, the winter solstice alignment, exist in the modern Irish genome as a residue. The monuments survived. The builders didn't. The people who built Newgrange left no identifiable genetic majority in any living Irish person. The monument survived 5,200 years. Its builders were genomically replaced within approximately 500 years of that man's burial. The mechanism of their disappearance has never been recovered in the archaeological or genomic record. There was no identified war, no identified plague, no identified famine of sufficient scale. The science has a replacement. It does not have a reason. The Ballinahaddy woman, black hair, brown eyes, buried in County Down 5, 200 years ago, is more closely related to a present-day Sardinian than to any modern Irish person. The man buried at Newgrange's center, product of first-degree incest, inheritor of a 5th-century dynasty, aligned to the winter solstice in his burial, is genomically closer to a Basque Neolithic sample than to a living Dubliner. These are not abstractions. They are calculations. The distance between the Newgrange man and the modern Irish is measurable, specific, and larger than popular culture has ever acknowledged. The phrase Irish ancestry, as used in genealogy, family history, and diaspora identity, begins genomically with the people who replaced the Newgrange builders, not the builders themselves. The identity called Irish was assembled from the biological residue of an erasure. That is not a political statement. It is a genomic calculation, and it leaves the meaning of Irish ancestry requiring complete reconstruction. We have the replacement. We have the genome data. We have the timeline. We have the monument. What we do not have is the cause. No identified war, no climate event, no pandemic of sufficient scale. The evidence for the how of the Newgrange builders' disappearance has not been found, which means either the evidence does not exist or it exists and has not yet been recovered. Both possibilities lead to the same place, the silence. The west of Ireland, County Mayo, County Clare, Connemara, the Atlantic coast. This is where R1b approaches 94 to 99% in the male population, where the Bronze Age replacement was most complete. But in specific subpopulations, in the mitochondrial DNA of women whose maternal lineages have rarely been studied, in the haplogroup IY chromosome fraction that persists at low but measurable frequencies in the modern Irish male genome, the signal of the Neolithic Anatolian farmers is still detectable, not dominant, not prominent, present. This isn't just ancient history. This is in your DNA right now. If your ancestry is Irish, or specifically if it includes dark-haired, dark-eyed lineages from the western Atlantic coast, the genome science does not tell you that you descend from the Newgrange builders. What it tells you is that you could. The fraction of Neolithic Anatolian farmer ancestry that survives in the modern Irish genome is not evenly distributed. It concentrates in specific family lines, in specific features, in phenotypes that have never been fully explained by the Bronze Age replacement alone. Dr. Cassidy's doctoral thesis documented genetic continuity across the Bronze Age and Iron Age transition in Ireland, evidence that the replacement was not instantaneous or total, but occurred across generations of admixture. A component of genetic continuity from the earlier Neolithic inhabitants persisted through it. The builders were not erased completely. They were diluted generation by generation until they were no longer a majority, until they became a residue, until they became a face. The haplogroup IY chromosome, the paternal signature of the Neolithic Anatolian farmers who built Newgrange, persists in the modern Irish male population at low but measurable frequency. In the 2020 Ancient DNA survey of 44 Neolithic Irish individuals, every male whose Y chromosome was recoverable carried haplogroup I. In the modern Irish DNA atlas, haplogroup I males exist today. They have names. They have addresses. They have family histories that, without knowing it, trace a 5,000-year-old continuous paternal lineage to the builders of the most sophisticated prehistoric monument on this island. The Black Irish phenotype, darker skin, dark hair, dark eyes, may be, in genomic terms, the visible surface of a deeper pattern. The persistence of Neolithic Anatolian farmer ancestry in populations where the Bronze Age replacement was less complete, not a foreign import, not an Armada souvenir. The oldest thing in Ireland, still visible in a living face, still unaccounted for by popular history, still carrying a name it was never given. The haplogroup IY chromosome is present in living Irish men today. The mitochondrial haplogroups associated with Neolithic Anatolian farmer women, the lineage of the Ballinahady woman, persist in the modern Irish maternal population at measurable frequency. These are not historical abstractions. They are genetic sequences in living bodies. The genome does not know the people who carry it have been told a different story about who they are. If you have dark hair and dark eyes in Irish ancestry, or if someone in your family does, here is the thing that genomic science now makes possible. To say with clinical precision, the features being carried may represent a measurably older configuration of the Irish genome than the features that the culture calls typically Irish. The pale skin, the blue eyes, the red hair that define the global image of Irish appearance arrived approximately 4,000 years ago with a Bronze Age migration from the Pontic Steppe. The darker phenotype they partially displaced was already on this island for 4,000 years before that. The question, where did the Black Irish come from, has in genomic terms a single verifiable answer. They were already here, which means the Spanish Armada explanation was not just wrong, it was inverted. The Armada story assumed the dark features were a foreign addition to a pale baseline. The genomic record confirms the pale baseline is the addition. The dark features are the baseline. The story that was told to explain them was told by the people who had replaced them, and they didn't know it. Before we get to the final piece, if the evidence in this episode changed something about how you understand Irish ancestry or your own, subscribe. The next episode goes further into what the genome record reveals about population replacement across the Atlantic world. Every claim sourced, every finding verified, no mythology, just the data. The Newgrange man, NG10, the product of first-degree incest, buried at the winter solstice sunrise inside the monument his dynasty built, died approximately 5,200 years ago. No descendant of his dynasty rules in Ireland today. No mythology preserves their language. No monument carries their name. The only record that they were here at all is locked inside a petrous bone, sequenced by a geneticist in a Dublin laboratory, and published in a journal that the people who carry their residual DNA will probably never read. The monument survived. The builders live only as a fraction. The genomic science has a replacement. It does not have a reason. The Bell Beaker migration reached Ireland. The Newgrange dynasty disappeared. Between those two facts, there is no recovered evidence that explains the gap. No weapons, no epidemic, no ecological collapse of sufficient scale. Just a genome that was majority one configuration in 2500 BCE and majority another by 500 BCE. The gap between those two dates contains the most important unanswered question in Irish prehistory. It is 1,000 years wide. It is empty. The name Black Irish was given to features that nobody could explain. The genomic record has now explained them. They are the visible surface of a replacement that never fully finished. The most ancient thing on the island, older than the Celts, older than the Bronze Age, older than the word Irish itself, is still present in a living face, unnamed, unreplaced, still here.